All right, we're back. Graveyard Shift Movie Podcast, episode number 105. This week, I'm all by myself. It's been a while since we've done one of these. I think, when was the last time I was alone on one? Was it maybe The Omen? Was that the last time? I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, it's been a busy week. I was sick for like 2 days. Tyler's been working. So this is literally, I'm filming this 9 hours before the podcast comes out. So it's been a little hectic. So The Fly postponed. We'll do The Fly next week. Yeah, so then everything should be back to normal. But today, I watched a movie called The Poughkeepsie Tapes from 2007, a movie I'd never heard of. But it met my criteria of it was less than 90 minutes long, which is what I was looking for. I went on Prime and looked around for a movie that was under an hour 30. That met the qualifications. And this movie, for a brief little summary, is basically a kind of a mockumentary type tape. Kind of like with the... what was the name of that movie with the fucking hole in the ground where all the monsters hid underneath or whatever? Whatever that movie was. You know how that movie was like sort of documentary type thing? This is kind of the same way. This one, however, it doesn't involve any like mystical monsters. It's basically just like a serial killer documentary. Kind of like what Netflix makes all the time now. I think one of the biggest weaknesses this movie has is the lead into it. It's all about how disturbing everything is and stuff. And I think they really tried hard they really tried hard to make something disturbing. And sometimes that works against you. Sometimes it's when you're not trying that you end up making like these really disturbing tapes. I don't think anything was very disturbing in this movie. There's a couple points that I'm like, okay, but it seemed like they were trying really hard for, it to be disturbing. Look back on Megan is Missing. That movie, the piece of shit that it is, Megan is Missing, the most disturbing part about it, well, there is that rape scene, but we won't talk about that, is that just one picture of the girl with, like, her mouth tied open or whatever. And that's the most disturbing part of that whole movie. And they didn't have to shoot a whole big thing. Hold on, let me let this fucking dog in. But yeah, so they had a lot of scenes of like them, with girls screaming, and they're trying to make like this super torture. They really try hard to make it disturbing, and I think they kind of fall flat on it sometimes. I'm gonna give the movie a 4. I think. Honestly, it kind of probably deserves a 5. But a lot of the acting and the reactions that some people had, I didn't think were realistic or very good. The main guy, the killer, for a lot of the movie, he screams, and he sounds just like the Mick Poyle dude from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And I couldn't get that out of my head. The dog's coughing. Calm down. But, yeah, so some people might like this movie more. But yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4. I didn't really care for it all that much. It wasn't terrible, but I definitely liked that other documentary type movie we watched a whole lot better. So yeah, this is probably gonna be a little short one, which is fine. We've been doing like 2-hour podcasts. I don't know when that became the minimum, but it has at some point. It's fun to have a nice little short one. And yeah, so hey, spoiler warning for the Poughkeepsie Tapes. If you've never seen it, I'm gonna ruin everything about it. So you've been warned. Before we start that though, maybe like 2 weeks ago or something, you guys might have remembered me and Tyler talking about Woodchuck green apple cider. That's something he told me about like 2 years ago, and I've never been able to try it. I went online. We got some Woodchuck cider here. I figured we'll do a taste test. This is my first time drinking it. Woodchuck, please sponsor me, even if it turns out I don't like this. But I think I will. We'll go ahead, Do a nice little pour. You can't really. Is this gonna fill up the whole glass? Oh my god, it smells delicious. It smells great. So, bottoms up, people. Woo! You know what? It does taste like that soda that I drank. This shit is delicious. Oh. Oh, man. Whew. Woodchuck, please. Sponsor me. Oh, my God. Oh, that's good. That's great. All right, well, that was fun. That's the end of the podcast. Thanks for thanks for coming. Yeah. So the movie begins with a funeral. We're attending someone's funeral. We don't know whose as of yet. But there's a funeral playing. Or not a funeral playing. There's a funeral taking place. And in the middle of this funeral, there's a bunch of cuts of this lady like dancing and having a good time and shit. And as it's playing these, we're getting our first little taste of the interviews that are a running thing throughout this movie, because like, once again, it's like a documentary, so they're interviewing all these cops and shit. And this one cop is talking about how these Poughkeepsie Tapes, in his 25 years of serial murder, he's never come across a more disturbing case than what happened to Cheryl Dempsey. And then immediately cuts to night vision camera footage of a guy pulling a body out of a grave. And then that's like the cut and its title card and the credits and stuff. You don't know who it is there, but spoiler, that was someone pulling out Cheryl's body, which you kind of figure. But yeah, also, if I remember correctly, that's the only time he ever uses the night vision camera in the whole movie. Like, every other time, it's just like the staticky black and white camera. Well, we won't get it, but maybe there's a reason for that. So, but yeah, so that's how the movie starts. And then we get some credits and title card and all this shit. And then after that, it turns out that this movie is in parts. So part 1 is the tapes. Gonna go ahead and let you guys know that at some point in here, I missed a tape. I think maybe tape 4. I missed tape 5 because I was like, man, tape 4 is really fucking long. And then it popped up and it was like tape 6. And I said, oh, wait a minute. I was like, I might have missed something here. But yeah, so they break it down into parts, which I guess is fine. Kind of seems a little pointless, but it's all right. Once again, I guess they're trying to keep that documentary feeling. I don't remember if that other movie we watched had anything similar to like breaking it down in parts and stuff. So part 1 is the tapes. They talk about how they found 144 hours worth of tapes in this guy's house. One cop, his whole job is to go through and break down every tape that they have. And he talks about like he can only get like an hour of sleep every night, and it was terrible. He says that his wife watched like 30 minutes of one on accident, and she wouldn't let him touch him for a year afterwards. And all I could think about is, boy, where were the tapes that they were watching when I was watching this movie? Because I never saw any tape that I was like, oh, I can't sleep. Like, yeah, there's some weird shit in here where like, there's 100 hours worth. Maybe it was 100 hours worth, I think, of just balloon stuff. And we get a video of, like, this lady having to blow up a balloon and then, like, bouncing on it and shit. And it's real weird. And then later in the movie, near, like, a peak part, they just keep replaying the clip of the lady bouncing on the balloon and shit. So that's pretty cool. There is also a really cool like shot here where they're talking about like everything that's on the tapes and stuff. And then they have the tapes lined up like on the ground of all the tapes. And the guy's like, "All right, these are like murders." And then he stops like maybe 3 rows into the tapes, and he's like, "And these are all the tapes involving Cheryl Dempsey." And dude walks like a good 15 feet. There's just 15 feet of tapes. It's all about Cheryl Dempsey. And it was like, oh shit, that's a lot. Fucking that, yeah. So that was a cool little, just showing you how much is involving that lady. And then that's it. That's part 1. It's just talking about the tapes they found and shit. The only tape we saw was the balloon tape, which is still, sure, man. I don't know what you got going on over there. Part 2 is First Blood, a Rambo fan over here. This basically is the introduction to his killings. We see his first kill here. There's also, the way we get brought into it is there's this FBI class going on, and the guy is showing these people these tapes. And he's like, by the end of this class, some of you will realize that you're not cut out for this. And then some of you will realize, hey, this is what I want. I want to catch people like this, And they keep that running for a couple tapes, I think. They show the FBI class. And then it never comes back again. They just kind of drop the FBI class, which I thought would have been a cooler setting if the whole movie took place in the FBI class. But, maybe that's just me. So the dude's first victim, they talk about, something must have snapped within him. Maybe he was married and him and his wife had a fight and the wife left and he just decided whoever he saw that was vulnerable next was going to die. And so it just so happens to be a little girl who I believe her parents later say that she was just barely 8, which doesn't seem to make, because I think they pan down and you see her age is 6. So I don't know if the parents are just bad parents and they forgot, or if there was something different that was 6 and 8. But she's in the middle of her yard playing with like her dolls and shit. And dude walks up to her, he's filming with his camera. And he's like, "Hey, how's it going? I like your dolls, what's their names?" But the little girl is like, "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers," and she's kind of just not interacting with him. And he's like, "Well, you're not supposed to be rude either, And so then he's like, "Do you want to see what it looks like inside from the other side of my camera?" And she's like, "No." And he's like, here you go. And so he turns the camera, and this is basically just a thing. So he can turn the camera and then hit the girl. Oh, God. Sorry about that, people. So then he can hit the girl and would not be one of the, because this movie's a pussy and it doesn't want to show you him hurting kids. So he like hits her as the camera is turned. And then he immediately picks her up and like hauls ass to his car and throws her in the back of the seat and takes off. Later they found her body, her head was bashed in, she was raped, they keep like, to show how disturbing this guy is and how vile his crimes are, they just keep adding shit onto what he does. Like later, somehow they get super into necrophilia and they keep being like, he returned to his victims to have sex with them again. And they just kept adding shit on to try to admit, like, this guy's a monster, We hear the 911 call from the mom when the daughter is missing, but I thought it was really bad. Maybe other people who watch this disagree, but I don't know, the way that she was reacting, and it just sounded really bad. Like, yeah, I don't know. I didn't like that part at all. Something about it was off to me. And that's the end of part 2. Part 3 is getting better. This part is all about him, because that was his first kill, and we see it was kind of just a rush, bang, bam, get her, take her away, kill her type thing. And this part is all about him getting better at his killings. And so he sets up these people. He acts like his car is broken down, and he asks them, "Hey, can you guys take me to the next exit?" And sort of, there's a gas station there and stuff. And they're like, oh, sure, you know. And so he gets in and he's still filming. And I was like, well, how's he going to explain the filming? It's like when you're watching porn when it's supposed to be like a real thing, but then like who's filming the whole, you know, one of them things. But he has an because he's like, hey, do you guys mind if I film this? I'm recording a little movie about my journey to wherever the fuck he was going. And they're like, oh, you know, don't worry about it. So they're trying to talk to him, and he's like, oh, my name's Ed. You know, they're like, are you from around here? And he's like, not really, you know. So he's like, all right, take this exit, and then around the bend, a couple miles, there's this gas station. But as they're going around the curve, he reaches into his bag and pulls out a hammer and smacks the dude on the back of the hammer. So then the dude is either dead instantly or he's knocked out. But either way, his foot is on the gas. So they keep speeding and they hit it like a tree and crash. And then the dude takes chloroform and puts it on the girl's mouth. But he's filming it and it looks ridiculous because you know what he's doing. And then later they have a cop explain, like, oh man, he put the thing here and then he was holding the camera out, and it looked ridiculous when he was doing it. But yeah, he drugs the lady, and then later we see him waking her up in the basement of his house, that we'll spend a lot of time in later on. He has like a scythe and shit, and he's like, come on, wake up, you know? And then as she's waking up, the tape ends, and that's when it cuts to the FBI class, and like people like this. And I was like, that's what makes y'all sick? The waking up part, not the murder you just saw 10 minutes ago? Like, yeah, I don't know. And then that was it. I think that was the last time you see the FBI class, is when they look disgusted because of that. But yeah, so eventually they found the husband's body with the wife's head in his stomach. I can't think of it now, but isn't there a movie where like that's a thing where they put like a dude's stuff? Or I know it's like a Mortal Kombat fatality where they like rip off your head and stick it in your stomach and shit. But I swear I've seen that somewhere else, but I'm not sure where it was. So the cops are able to take this road he was on, this route, and figure out, all right, there's only one way you can travel on it. So this guy, and it's like, you know, it was like 400 miles or something. So they knew he had to stop it for gas at some point. So they went to every gas station along that route and asked to see the security footage from that specific day. And the one cop is like, it took a long time to do, but it ended up giving us our first look at the killer. And we see the dude at the gas station pumping gas, and in his other hand, he's like making signs and shit. It ends up being that he was signing Red House. And that leads them to find another body behind a place called the Red House Inn. That might have been the wife's body, actually, they found, without the head or whatever. But, yeah, so he does that. And then after that, it cuts, and they talk about how good this guy is at dismembering people and shit. And we get a bunch of footage of him, like, with an axe and a saw, and he has a blowtorch at one point, and he's, like, fucking dismembering people and getting rid of their body. And, like, dumping, you know, bits of their body all across the states and shit, which is something my granddad, who is R.I.P., rest in peace, granddad, but he's my mom's dad, and apparently she had this boyfriend, and he was like, if you ever hurt her, I'll chop you up into pieces, and I'll dump different parts of you in different parts of the world or whatever. And yeah, I wonder if he has done that before. It was a very specific thing to do, but you know. Yeah, so yeah, he's dismembering bodies and shit, and that's the end of part 3. Part 4 is Cheryl Dempsey. Part 4 is what I believe to be the longest part, but apparently I missed when it cut over to part 5 at some point. So if anyone knows, put it in the comments where it cut over to part 5. So it starts off, he's watching her like come out of school or something. I'm pretty sure it is school, which then seems weird to me later because when he goes to her house, her like boyfriend comes over. And this house is fucking huge. So I don't know if there's more roommates or what the deal is, or if that was her parents' house or what, because I don't know how. Maybe it was her parents' house, because I don't see how she could afford to live in a place like that when she's in college, Dude is staying outside of her house watching her through the window, and he has this walkie-talkie looking device, but somehow it's able to intercept phone calls. I'm sure that's a real thing, and someone would know. I'm sure Tyler, if he was fucking here, he'd be like, that's a signal interceptor or something. Like, he would know somehow, But yeah, and so he's listening into her phone call with her boyfriend, and of course in the phone call she's like, you ever get the feeling that something bad's gonna happen? Like, she can tell that this dude's watching her and shit, and he's like, oh yeah, sometimes, I just kind of put it out of my mind, And then the camera cuts and it's nighttime. The scariest part of this movie, ladies and gentlemen, if you watch this movie, the scariest part of this movie, which they stop eventually, but for the first like 25 minutes, they do it a lot. The scariest part is when the camera will cut, he'll be outside and it'll cut to him inside, and it makes like the staticky, like, and it's super fucking loud every time. And that's the scariest part of the movie. So yeah, it makes that loud noise. It cuts to him walking around in her house. And he's like picking up a kitchen knife and shit. And he goes into her bedroom, and this bitch is taking a shower with her door open, with the bathroom door open. Maybe it's just me, okay? I don't care if I'm home alone. I don't care where. I'm closing the bathroom door when I'm taking a shower. I feel way too vulnerable from whatever with the bathroom door open while I'm taking a shower. I'm naked, little dick out. Like, it's like there's no way I'm showering with the door open. So maybe she just doesn't have these thoughts that I do, even though she just a scene ago was like, you ever think something bad's gonna happen to you? All right, I'm gonna get naked and in a shower with the door open. Yeah, it just I don't do that shit. So he's about to sneak into the bathroom, but then the door downstairs closes, and it ends up being that the boyfriend's home. So he sneaks over into the closet and like leaves the door open a crack. I swear you can see him like peeking out during the times he's hiding in there. The boyfriend brings up chocolate ice cream and beer to her, so they're having beer and ice cream, which I was gonna criticize, but then I realized that me and Maverick once drank green apple vodka and green apple soda and ate ice cream, which is a terrible combination. Pretty sure I vomited, but yeah, so I can't really judge them, live their life. So yeah, so they're talking. They start to like fuck, and he's watching in the closet the whole time. It cuts to further on in the night where they've made their way downstairs and they're cuddled up on the couch, and the dude creeps down there, still filming and everything. And they wake up and they're like, "Oh, I guess we should be heading to bed," And they start to like walk and get ready for bed. And the dude filming stalks after the dude, the boyfriend, and I don't know if he turns on a light or, oh, you know what it must have been? I think it was because a light turns on and the guy turns around and then he sees the killer and the killer like stabs him a bunch. And then when the killer turns around, Cheryl's there watching it happen. So I think Cheryl came in and turned the light on, and that's what that was. I just figured it out now. Yeah, so he stabs the boyfriend. Boyfriend's dead. Cheryl sees this. She goes running. But dude chases her, tackles her, and fucking kidnaps her. Because, of course he does. We get a newscast about how Cheryl's boyfriend was murdered and how she's missing and all this shit. And then it cuts over, and the next tape we see she's hog-tied, like in the basement on her stomach, hog-tied, and her head's tied like this. And the dude comes in the frame, and he's dressed like the plague doctors, with the long fucking thing and stuff. And he's beating her, and we get like a 2007 version of your name is Tobe. No, it's Kunta Kinte. But instead, he's like, what's your name? And she's like, Cheryl. And he's like, your name is Slave. And he's like hitting her and shit. And she's yelling. And this goes on for a little bit. I think like 3 or 4 times he asks her. And then eventually she's like, my name's Slave, Yeah. And so, her name's Slave. Cuts to later on, and she's tied up, standing up. And he comes over and like grabs her, and he's like, "Are you happy that I'm gonna kill your parents?" Which is a weird thing to say because he never does kill her parents, but he starts dunking her in water, and she's like, "Yes, I'm happy you're gonna kill my parents because I only care about you." And he's like, "You're a slave. You don't need parents. I'm your master." All this shit, and she's like, "Yeah, This is when I wrote down, dude just keeps yelling, and he sounds like McPoyle from Always Sunny. But yeah, and then he ties her back up. And then it cuts to a newscast of like Cheryl's mom, and she's like, to the person who did this, please just bring my daughter back home. Like that's ever fucking worked in the history of murders. And then it cuts, and she's standing out in front of the house, and no one's there. And the killer dude walks up to her, and he's filming. And he's like, I'm real sorry about what happened. If there's anything I could do, let me know, And she's like, thanks. And then she looks over, and maybe it's because this guy has a camera in her fucking face. But somehow she's able to tell that this is the guy who did this. But she doesn't do anything. And in her interview, she's like, I didn't stop him because I was scared or some shit. So we do get a drawing of the dude, and that's like the suspect or whatever, which I assume is what she gave to the police. But yeah, and so he never does anything to the parents. He goes back home. He makes Cheryl dress up in like this old wench dress costume type thing, and then put on like this plain white mask that she wears throughout the rest of the movie. Maybe that's when the tape changed, when he was making her dress up. I'm not sure. I don't know where this tape changed. Then we get one random tape of him, like picking up this. I assume it's a prostitute just because there's a big thing about him murdering prostitutes in this movie. But he picks up this lady and he murders her, and we get clips of them like finding her body in a field and shit. Which just seems kind of thrown in there, kind of be like, oh, hey, this guy's still a murderer, because they've been focusing so much time on the Cheryl thing, and yeah, so, what? God damn, that's good. Woodchuck, please. Then apparently, dude, also got a cop car at some point and is going around arresting prostitutes and people and killing them, so he's arresting them, and then once he gets them in the car, he's like, haha, bitch, I got you, and then he'll like kill them, classic serial killer stuff. He arrests one girl and takes her back to the basement and ties her up, and he then makes Cheryl kill her. He gives Cheryl a knife. I don't know how much time has passed since Cheryl arrived here, but clearly enough time has passed that Cheryl knows the rules. She doesn't want to upset the dude. She's like, she just does whatever he tells her to. So she comes over with the knife and gives the softest little neck slice you've ever seen in your life. But that gets the job done. Throat slit. That girl's dead. So Cheryl has killed her first person. This is when we get the little tidbit about how the dude supposedly would return to his dead bodies later and rape them, which they throw in here once again, trying to add in like, this guy is vile, he's disgusting, Then the dude gets a knock on his door, and it's two little Girl Scouts, and they're selling cookies. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I might buy some cookies." He's like, "Why don't you guys come in?" So he brings them in. He's like, "Do you guys want some Coke?" And they're like, "Sure." So he gives them 2 cups of Coke. I assumed he was like he had drugged them or something. But he starts talking to him, and he's like, "So you guys drive your bikes here?" And they're like, and the one girl's like, "No, I live right here in this neighborhood." And he's like, "Oh, you live in the neighborhood?" And then the other girl's like, "I don't. I live in Central." Uh, and so then he starts asking, like, "Well, did you tell your parents where you were going?" And I think the girl who lives in the neighborhood is like, "Yeah." And the other girl's like, "Sometimes." And I thought it was going to be one of the things where he was going to end up murdering the girl who doesn't live in the neighborhood. But, he I don't know what I'm trying to say. Um, he's still talking to him, and then they start hearing some noises going on in the basement. And so he's like, that's a raccoon. Sometimes I get raccoons in my basement. And the one little girl's like, "We don't have raccoons here." And he's like, "Yeah, we do." And then he's like, "You guys want to see the raccoon in my basement?" And the one girl who lives in the neighborhood is like, "Yeah, I don't believe you." But then the other little girl is like, "I think I want to leave. And yeah, and so you're not sure where it's gonna. But then eventually he's like, "It looks like I got to deal with some stuff. Why don't you two let yourselves out?" So those 2 girls make it out of there. Um, then he turns around, and it gets to where the camera pans down, and I guess I don't know where she was the whole time, but apparently now Cheryl is in the room because there's like a little handheld mirror on the ground, and you can see Cheryl standing there with her mask, and he's like, "I thought I told you, or I thought you said it was under control down there," and she's like, "I thought it was, it's not my fault," and he's like, "I'm gonna have to fucking punish you," uh, and so yeah, so that was that whole scene. Um, After that, the cops talked about how next they got their big break, which is at one of the victims' house. They found a glass with a fingerprint and saliva on it, um, and it ended up being this guy. James Foley was the guy. They go and find him. Turns out he was like in the neighborhood when all these murders happened. He was in Philadelphia when some murders happened over there. Um, he was an undercover cop. He would drive around in an unmarked car, so that fit into the cop thing where the guy was arresting people and murdering them, and the prostitutes that were dying. There was a thing throughout where the prostitute every time he would kill these prostitutes, and he would leave like chunks in their. He would leave like a slash on their cheek. And another cop talks about sometimes he would do like really surgical precision, like dismemberments of the body, and then other times it would just be like hack jobs and stuff. Um, and so a lot of times the prostitutes would be like these really nice dismemberments and shit. So they go and they find this guy, and in his car he has bloodstains and jewelry from the victims, which not sure how they ever explain that thing, but maybe it's because he was arresting prostitutes, so some of them just happened to match. I don't know why he wouldn't clean his filthy fucking car, but whatever. Um, yeah, so they arrest this guy. They keep wanting him to take a plea deal because he doesn't have an alibi for any of this shit, and he's like, "No, I'm not taking a plea deal." And so he ends up being charged as guilty, and they give him the death penalty. And this is when, like, they give him the death penalty, and they're like, "He's gonna die tomorrow." And it's like, guys, people get the death penalty, and they fucking, like, are on the was it? Death row for, like, 20 years. Like, it doesn't work like that. I'm sure it probably has. Like, there's probably instances where it's, like, that's happened. But yeah, usually it's like 20 years, and there's a bunch of like different court cases where they try to like get it taken out and all this shit. But they're like, yeah, he's gonna be killed within the hour. So we get a reenactment of them wheeling him into the execution room. It's playing an audio tape from the execution about the guy's declining prayer and declining last words, and they're injecting them and shit. And this is when it keeps cutting to different victims throughout the movie, and it keeps showing that one clip of the lady bouncing on the balloon like a lot, like a disturbing amount of times that they showed it. Yeah, and then eventually they kill the guy. James Foley died at 12:24 in the morning on some fucking day. I think they might have had the date too, but I don't remember. Then it flashes to September 9th, 2001, and I said, oh my god, this guy plotted 9/11. I thought that's where this movie was going. But yeah, it cuts to September 9th. And we see the guy in a bar filming the execution. So you know that they had the wrong guy. This is when it cuts to part 6, missed one. And I was like, well, shit, I missed one with part 5. I don't know where the fuck that was. But missed one. And this cop says he got a letter in his mail, and all the letter said was missed one. And then he gets a phone call from another cop, and it's like, you got to get down here. It turns out they found another body. And so immediately they knew that the guy that they just fucking murdered was innocent. He was an innocent guy. The next day, they were going to print out like this whole big thing about how the guy was innocent and shit. But then 9/11 happened, and so the story got buried on like page 6. So the guy was like, on every other day, this would have been a huge case. This guy plotted this whole murder to get this cop killed. It was like the ultimate, that's why the guy would have like the prostitutes, and he would make it seem like the same guy every time. And the cop car he was framing this one cop. I don't know why he was framing this one cop, but he did. And then there's a whole thing about how, like, he makes it seem like he's just killing prostitutes. So then other people feel safer, and he's able to kill them because he's not leaving traces on, like, regular people. He's only leaving traces on the prostitutes. Yeah, so 9/11 happened, so no one ever knew that this guy was innocent. The dude's son is getting interviewed, and he's like, still to this day, people come up to me, and when I tell them my name, they're like, oh, are you related to that killer? And he's like, actually, that guy wasn't the killer, We cut over to the killer, and he picks up this English chick in the back of his squad car that he has, because her, like, car is broken down or something. And as he's driving, he's like, hey, why did you call me officer? And she's like, what? And he's like, yeah, why did you call me officer? I'm not a cop. And she's like, what do you mean you're not a cop? And he's like, yeah, I'm a fucking butcher. And this, I think, is the best part of the movie. Because the way this lady reacts is how I think people would react. Where she's not screaming and stuff. Like, she's sort of, like, in shock and calmed down as it's, like, settling into her. And she's like, please don't do this, And the dude is like, well, listen, I'll tell you what. I'll pull over, and you let me rape you, and I'll let you live. And so the girl thinks about it for a minute, and then she agrees. She's like, okay, She's like, at this point, she's just doing whatever she can to live. But the dude's like, you think I'm going to fall for that? You're not actually going to let me rape you. And she's like, yes, I am. Yes, I am, And he's like, nah. He's like, for the things I'm going to do to you, you wouldn't want to be alive to see it. And then as he's getting out of the car, this is when the girl starts freaking out and yelling. She's like, oh my God. And I thought this lady was the best part of the movie. Like, this whole interaction. Yeah, but then he doesn't kill. He just, like, knocks her out and takes her back to the basement. Like, I thought he was just going to kill her there. It seems weird that he took her all the way back to the basement to kill her. Because, spoiler, that's what happens. She wakes up and she's tied up. And she has this piece of tape over her mouth. But the way the light is reflecting off of it, it looks like she's dripping milk from her nose. And then out of the corner comes what I'm going to say was still Cheryl. But dressed in like black leotard, and it has the mask, and it's crawling like a weird monster looking thing, and it crawls over to her. And this is why I say I think it was Cheryl, because it stands up and it has the plague mask on, which is what the guy wears. So I'm not sure if it was the dude or Cheryl, but either way, it has these needle finger things, and it sticks them into her neck, and she like coughs up blood into the tape and shit and dies. And I thought that was really well done as well. Um, then this one cop reads a bunch of, he's like, you guys want to know why we had such a hard time finding this guy? Here's all the profiles from all the murders. And everyone is like different. It's like, clearly it was his first time. Clearly it was his first time. This dude must have been doing this for a long time. He's probably pretty unkept. This dude's really clean. And like just the way he keeps, it's kind of like Henry, where he's like, never make it be the same. But this guy I think is a little more intelligent than Henry is. But yeah, that's the end of part 6. Part 7 is called Found. They find the house that this guy lives in. They were led there by the killer himself. He basically gave them the address. And they go full on invasion. SWAT team, bomb squad, all this shit. And they go bust into the house. But the dude's not there, and neither is any fingerprints or visible DNA that guy was ever there. But there is still blood and everything from the victims and the closet where he's left all the tapes at. Also, in the other room, they go in and they find this big wooden box, and they open it up, and there is Cheryl laying in the box with her mask on, and she's like knocked out and shit, but she's alive. And so they get her out of there, and they get her to the hospital, and the doctor talks about how he's never seen these types of wounds on the, and like apparently the dude would break her arm and then like keep her in like a tightening thing to like make it aggravated more, and burns and pulling teeth out and all this shit. And then they talk about like, she was in the hospital and her injuries kept getting worse, and we couldn't figure out how it was. And then they eventually realized that this girl's lived with pain so long she doesn't know how to cope without it. So she's been hurting herself when people aren't around, because that's like the only way she knows life. But yeah, eventually she gets out of the hospital, and then we cut over and we get an interview with Cheryl. And she's sitting on the couch, and every time they ask her a question, she's like, I don't know what you guys want me to say. Which is basically to me, because for how long she's lived with that guy, she always knows what he wants her to say, and he'll tell her what he wants her to say, and so she doesn't know how to interact with regular people. And you can tell she's like nervous, and she's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And she reaches up and she scratches her head, and she's missing a hand. And that's like supposed to be like a reveal how she's missing a hand. It looks really shitty though, because it's all blurry, and clearly they used a green screen. I think when I looked it up even, Cheryl's stump hand effect was made using a green screen and a glove. It looked really bad because you could see how blurry it was and shit. But she scratches her head, and then she talks about she's like, he loved me, no one wants me to say that, but he did. He loved me, and he took care of me, and he only hurt me when I made him hurt me and all this shit. And so, you tell, like, she's not the same anymore because of, how long she was in. It's been a lot, because, like, friends she had in college are now, like, parents and shit, and they're talking about how weird it is to see her back now. Yeah, so they do this interview with her, and then it stops and it zooms in on her face, and we find out that Cheryl killed herself. And in her note, she professed her undying love for her master. And and then it cuts and we see a newscast that her body was stolen from that grave and stuff, so that was her body that was taken. And then, also there was a thing where, like, there was a bunch of tapes left in the hole, which they never seemed to mention. And then that one cop whose job it was to look through all the tapes says that, the weird thing, all the tapes were numbered, pneumatically. Is that how you say it? But there were 27 tapes missing that we never could find. And so he's like, was his face visible on there? Was it worse than everything we've seen before? What were on those tapes? And you'll never fucking know. They'll never, there's no answer for that. I guess it's up to you to think about it. Um, and then the cop who sort of has been like the main lead host throughout this thing is like, yeah, that guy's still out there. And I'll tell you what, if this film you're making ever makes it to theaters, we're going to be watching every screening because we know that guy is going to show up and he's going to be sitting there in the theater. And it's clearly supposed to be like people in the theater like, oh, looking around and shit. But spoiler, this movie never fucking made it to theater. It premiered at like a film festival and then got canned for a long time and then like got like video on demand release and shit. But yeah, that's the ending of the Poughkeepsie Tapes. The dude got away. They still don't know who he is, and Cheryl fucking killed herself. So that dude's still. One cop even says he's like, I'm sure that dude's still out killing people. They don't know he's there, but somewhere the crime rate, the murder rate, disappearance rate, it's all going up, and it's because of him and shit. And yeah, so that's kind of surprised me. I assumed because they were called the Poughkeepsie Tapes that the guy's name was going to be Poughkeepsie, but then that's like the town. So yeah, that's how they found everything. And he got away, and yeah, so there you go. That's the Poughkeepsie Tapes from 2007. Best of, worst of. My worst of. I don't know. My worst of, the thing that comes to my mind is that 911 call from the mom. But I'm not sure. I really didn't like the killers screaming all the time because, like I said, he sounded like McPoyle. None of the kills were good except for the English chick. And I don't know this type of movie. You're supposed to enjoy the kills, but I don't know. It seems like you spice something up. It was mostly like off camera and like a bludgeon strike sometimes, but that was about it. So I think I'll go with the 911 call. The 911 call is my worst of. Best of is gonna be the getting the English chick in the back of his squad car and the whole interaction with her, and then leading up to her being stabbed in the neck, because that death was pretty cool, and it was creepy with the maybe Cheryl coming out of the corner. But yeah, so that's my best of. And I think that's it. We don't have anything else to talk about. I don't have a budget because this movie never. Well, I didn't see a budget for it, and this movie never made it to theaters, so it doesn't have a box office anywhere. And there ain't shit to talk about because no facts for this movie. But anyway, like I said, some people might like it better than I did. Some people might find it more disturbing than I did. But it kind of goes to, how much shit we watch. And like I said, when the movies have the whole thing about, oh, it's the most disturbing thing ever, it almost never ends up living up to the hype. Like I said, the only movie that's ever lived up to that hype is Cannibal Holocaust. And a lot of that has to do with the animal murder that I wasn't aware was going to be in the movie. But yeah, like even Henry, that movie loves to talk about how disturbing it is. It's not really like the home invasion killing is pretty disturbing. But that's about it. Like, I can't think of another part of that movie that was really made me like disturbed or whatever. So yeah, Megan is missing. Didn't live up to the picture at the end was disturbing, and the rape thing at the end was kind of like, oh man, they went all in on that. But yeah, so I don't know. It was fine for what it was, I guess. Like I said, I didn't, and by fine for what it was, I mean I still didn't like it very much, but it was enough to get like a 4. I'm not giving it a 5 because I'm not in the middle. Like I didn't like it, but yeah. So there you go. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Once again, Woodchuck, please sponsor me. This is delicious, and I don't want to have to fucking ship it from Vermont every time I buy it. Which I guess It still would come from Vermont, but I get it free. Oh, God. But I'll plug you every time. Woodshuck hard cider, Granny Smith tart green apple. Get it now. But yeah, so next week, The Fly, we'll watch it. I hope. But so next week we should be back to regular shit. Shorts may be coming out. Gaming channel link in the description and everything. That channel has been we've been doing a bunch of shit. A lot of shorts have been coming out over there. I just put out literally last night a Hell Let Loose video that I really liked. That game is really fun as well, so go check that out if you haven't. The wrestling channel will also be in the description. We haven't uploaded on that in like 2 months. I don't know when we will, but eventually. And yeah, so anyway, besides all of that, thanks for watching. We will see you next week. Tyler will be here, hopefully. Maverick might be back at some point, too. He's unemployed now. Shout out to that. Not like he chose to be unemployed. It wasn't like he got canned or anything, but yeah. Sorry, thanks for watching. See you next week for The Fly. And yeah. Bye, everyone.